There are a lot of things that are going on in my mind right now. There are certain things I agree with, and there are certain things I am finding difficult right now to start thinking that direction. Maybe I would like to share with Shah, and you might like to consider me. At one stage, you said that we have to start thinking as a Hindu first, not as a caste. Now, here I have a slight disagreement.
Okay.
Why a Hindu first? Why not an Indian first? Because the moment you start thinking as a Hindu, we will break our country, I feel. We have to think as Indian first and then as a Hindu. Okay. No, still, when we make statements, we have to be careful about it. Second thing is, at one stage, you talked about Red Bindi gang chasing us, Sabrimala, and I didn't get your name. You are fighting for that case. I feel that gender equality is important. Maybe something is part of our culture, but we don't need to agree that everything that is part of our culture is good. If we disagree, then we must be able to question that.
I have to answer to this question.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I have
Both the questions.
I
Yes.
have one or two more points.
Please, yes.
Uh, at one stage, you said that when the topic was being introduced, that the government decided to pass a bill for 80% of the population, which was, and not for the rest. Now it might be a contrarian, but I'll request you to be because
Please. As a lawyer, I'm supposed to be open-minded. You proceed.
unless we discuss these aspects,
Sure.
how do I
Understand.
believe or accept? When it was being discussed for whom to implement, now the normal management philosophy is that Pareto's law, law of 80-20. 20% of the profit comes from, 80% profit comes from 20% of your customers. If you know that it is Hindu, which is the largest population, and you want to bring out a reform, you have to start with the largest population, the lowest. Smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, here, are we talking about reforms, or, do we have a problem with the reforms, or do we have a problem with.
He's answered that in the sense that if you want to apply a certain law or rule, apply it to everybody or don't apply it to anybody.
But subsequent discussions went in a different direction, and that's why I am raising this.
No. Hold on. Explain for the benefit of the audience,
Yeah.
which specific direction did you think I take the talk to?
See, we started talking about.
My only request is, don't hold back anything and don't search for words. Be blunt.
Okay.
No, I welcome bluntness because I'm equally blunt. Proceed.
I was talking about, do we have a problem with the state control in Hindu, or do we have a problem that state control is not there with Muslims, with Sikhs, with
I'm
Jains?
happy you asked that question. Okay. Now I'll ask this
So these are primarily my
Right.
coming to my mind.
Understood. Fine. So actually, there are three questions that you raised, and I have to answer the question of Sabarimala because that's the worst possible example you could have given. I'm sorry. I won't hold back my punches at this point. Please understand, Sabarimala is not a question of culture. It's not a question of gender. It's not a question of fashion. It's not a question of misogyny. It's a question of a certain tradition which has origins which have been contorted, distorted, and played out in a very different light in public domain. Every person who talks on this particular issue, I just want to ask him one question, him or her or him in that order. Please tell me, what do you know about the origins of the practice and the reasons for the existence of the practice and the scriptural basis for that practice for you to arrive at this peremptory conclusion that this is a consequence of gender inequality? You've thrown the conclusion out first. I would want you to retrace your steps and tell me what is it that you know about the practice in order for you to have arrived at that supposedly informed conclusion that is based on misogyny.
May I request you to repeat me there?
Yes. So, could you please do this?
okay, I'll do this because I've had the opportunity to speak on this on NDTV, which is, I think, the forum on which it should be spoken on, and I'll answer the question. There are two kinds of practices, particularly in Kerala, where there are certain spaces which are exclusive for females and certain spaces which are exclusive for males and certain spaces which are meant for everyone. You want a diversity to be protected, then please protect these diverse traditions as well. There are temples where men dare not enter, and particularly days where streets are vacated of men. Men can't even step into those streets because it's meant for women to pray in a manner they want to pray. There are deities which specifically are meant only for females. This is one thing. Two, we have to understand that if you want to have this discussion cannot start unless and until we take a look at the basis, which is the tradition. And what is the tradition? Every temple has a tradition with respect to the mythology it subscribes to, the history that it subscribes to, from where the tradition flows. In this case, the deity of Sabarimala, Lord Ayyappa, has taken upon himself, at least that is the belief, the vow of Naistika Brahmacharya, which means eternal Brahmacharya. Naistika Brahmacharya is equally a tradition which is observed by a lot of sadhus who are not meant to come in touch with women at all. And this is not based on misogyny. There could be reciprocal rules with respect to women and their contact with men. It's not something that is entirely directed at women based on discrimination. This is the worst possible myth that somehow these people, the spin masters, have managed to put it out in public domain. The rules of that school of thought require that you do not come in contact with women who still have reproductive capabilities. Now they've twisted this entire argument, and since we are all adults here, I'll have to make this point. We've twisted this entire argument to say this is based on your hatred of or your stigma associated with menstruation. The argument has gone to that level. There are temples in this country which worship the physical process of menstruation. The Kamakhya temple. Who doesn't know this? Therefore, using one particular instance, and that too with truncated knowledge of the history of the particular temple, to bandy the entire institution and use it as the launch pad for banding the entire community, I think needs to stop. This is the factual answer. I have not brought in emotion here. Second, as part of their analysis, the law requires the Supreme Court to do two things. And I've written on this issue, specifically I've written on the Sabarimala issue, which is why I was called on the debate, because I've specifically said, please don't bring caste and feminism in every discussion because not everything is related to that. There are some things which are dehorse that. The Supreme Court has said, and this is citing Article 16.5 of the Constitution with respect to appointment of priests in the Madurai Meenakshi temple, saying that respect the agamas or the scriptures that apply to a temple as long as they are not negatively discriminatory. इसका मतलब ये है, you are entitled to select a few people in terms of ingress and egress on positive attributes. But if you say, this person of this caste shall not enter this particular place, that tradition has no business being in modern India and constitutional India. I'm with you. And if it says, no woman can enter that particular place, you're right. But it has qualified the position, it has given an age group, and it follows a certain tradition which is based on certain aspects which most people may not even believe in, or even if they believe in, they would not want to say that they believe in it. Do you know the tradition of Deva Prashna, which is actually followed in Sabarimala? The tradition is that the chief priest is supposed to be having a dialogue with the deity. And people are selected based on several considerations, right? From horoscope and whatnot, just how a Shankaracharya is actually selected for different mutts. And on the basis of that tradition, whatever he conveys as the will of the deity is implemented. Now, I have a question to ask. Have you seen the popular video of YouTube where in a certain mosque, they throw children right from the top and somebody is actually catching them at the bottom? This continues till date. This happens. Nobody questions that. The reaction, the original reaction in the Haji Ali case was, we don't want to get into this because this is a religious issue. It has been implemented. Why? The statement that was made by the board of Haji Ali was that it is a sin for women to come and touch or even be in the proximity of the mosque and the dargah because it is impure. That is the statement that they made. Ask one representative of the TDB or the Travancore Devaswam board to make the statement. They will not make the statement because that is not the truth. That is the point. Here you have an instance where somebody is saying that women are positively dirty and them entering the place of worship is wrong and it defiles the place. Never has such a statement been made in court with respect to the Ayappa temple. That's point number one. So I've answered that question. Now, what was the second question? Why did I go towards? I went in a different direction. Do I have a problem that the state doesn't interfere with Muslims and Christians and interferes only with Hindus? You know what? Yes and no. I'll answer the question straight on. I'll take the bull by its horns. If you're constantly let's say if you're constantly witnessing special treatment with respect to one party, and you ask yourself, this person has the power to equally interfere and presumably reform that person, why does he choose to do only with me? Your so-called Pareto principle 80-20 का ratio जो है 50 साल के लिए ऐसे रहा है क्या? You should have started on the premise when the Hindu bill was introduced in the 1950s and 60s. I say, okay, that's fine. I'll give you the benefit of doubt as far as your intention is concerned during that era. For 50 years, you've not taken any endeavor to do this? How is this correct? The proof of your lack of will to interfere with the community is clear in this. 50 साल से ज़्यादा चाहिए आपको इसके लिए proof के लिए? Yes. No, I'm not done yet. 3. State control. In absolute terms, I have a problem with it if it goes beyond constitutional limits. Simply because, regardless of who has what freedom, I don't have the freedom to do what I'm supposed to be doing under the Constitution or what I have the right to do under the Constitution. You know what is the difference between a fundamental right and a constitutional right? All of us actually keep using the word fundamental right very frequently. I tell you, fundamental right is fundamental because it is deemed to be in you because you're a human being. It is recognized by the Constitution. It is not granted by the Constitution. Constitutional right is granted by the Constitution. That is the difference. So, fundamental right in principle is much more sacrosanct. Second, it is easier to interfere with the fundamental right than the constitutional right. The limitations imposed on fundamental right as part of part 3, you can eviscerate it easily compared to constitutional right. एक टाइम पे ये कहा गया था that right to property को हमें fundamental right बनाना चाहिए. It was a fundamental right originally, brought out of fundamental right and made a constitutional right. A lot of people were happy saying that it's easier to protect property thanks to the fact that it's become a constitutional right as opposed to fundamental right because the state has limited scope to interfere with the constitutional right than with the fundamental right. That's one school of thought. Now, one is a question of what I want to do, and I want to enjoy my fundamental rights to the maximum extent possible. This is a question that is meant for an internal audience. It's not meant कि we are not looking outward कि उसके साथ क्या हो रहा है. ये हमारे साथ क्या हो रहा है is the question. Second, when a person goes through this, human psychology is to look around and say ये सबके साथ हो रहा है या सिर्फ मेरे साथ हो रहा है? ये सवाल पूछने में क्या गलत है? क्यों नहीं बात? No. If everybody can talk of sentiments, certain sections of sentiments, this sentiment and that sentiment, why can't we say that we are equally hurt at the discriminatory treatment that is being meted out to 85% of this population? That limb of the argument, I will not shy away from. It's an equally valid argument. It's a legal argument. Discrimination is based on this. Discrimination is not just meant, it's not based on exploitation that I suffer alone. If I am the only one to suffer exploitation, equally I have a problem under the Constitution. How can a legal, logical, and a constitutional argument be communal in nature? If my argument has no basis in the Constitution, you're right, but it has a basis in the Constitution. Therefore, for me, it is both. My freedom in absolute terms and my freedom in relative terms, both.